Hello, hello. We have another wonderful guest today. We have Pat Barbarito in the house. Hey, Pat, how are you today?
Great. So happy to be here, Junie. So happy to.
I'm so thrilled to have you. You have a different voice that you're going to bring to this podcast. I've had some lawyers, I've had some divorce attorneys, I've had financial advisors, I've had some interesting people that were outside of the I'm a relationship coach. What I find so interesting is to be discussed in a few minutes. Let me share with you who this amazing woman is. So, as I just said, I mentioned lawyer first. Pat is a highly successful divorce attorney, and she knew all about complex relationships and the laws that govern them until her own marriage of 17 years ended, and she was determined to get to the heart of love, marriage, and human connection. So she has a before story and an after story and how to navigate what goes on when it comes to relationships and shifting. And her journey spanned the entire scope of relationships, from the science of attraction to the financial impact of separation, to old myths that society still touts as true, to new laws that outline how to navigate both uniting and uncoupling. So we have a lot to discuss. And oh, just FYI, she's got a podcast called Heartbreak and Hope with Pat Barbarito. And we'll let you know how to find her with that podcast, because she offers amazing insights and anecdotes and guidance from a variety of experts, and includes her own perspective on how best to thrive through any stage of relationship building. So, wherever you are, sister, buckle up, because we're about to dive in with Pat. How are you today, Pat? How's it going?
Great. So happy to be here, Junie. So happy to.
I'm so thrilled to have you. You have a different voice that you're going to bring to this podcast. I've had some lawyers, I've had some divorce attorneys, I've had financial advisors, I've had some interesting people that were outside of the I'm a relationship coach. What I find so interesting is to be discussed in a few minutes. Let me share with you who this amazing woman is. So, as I just said, I mentioned lawyer first. Pat is a highly successful divorce attorney, and she knew all about complex relationships and the laws that govern them until her own marriage of 17 years ended, and she was determined to get to the heart of love, marriage, and human connection. So she has a before story and an after story, and how to navigate what goes on when it comes to relationships and shifting. And her journey spanned the entire scope of relationships, from the science of attraction to the financial impact of separation, to old myths that society still touts as true, to new laws that outline how to navigate both uniting and uncoupling. So we have a lot to discuss. And oh, just FYI, she's got a podcast called Heartbreak and Hope with Pat Barbarito. And we'll let you know how to find her with that podcast, because she offers amazing insights and anecdotes and guidance from a variety of experts, and includes her own perspective on how best to thrive through any stage of relationship building. So, wherever you are, sister, buckle up, because we're about to dive in with Pat. How are you today, Pat? How's it going?
It's going great. I was so excited and looking forward to this conversation. Talking about next level love, as you call it, or second acts, is one of my favorite topics at the ripe old age of 67. It's really a wonderful topic. So I'm very excited.
Beautiful, beautiful. Me too. And yeah, second act is a big deal. When I'm 60 myself, and there's just, it's like our life is so important, our future and what we want to make of it. It's like calling us. And the last thing we want to do is get in our own way, or be carrying a bag of the past that's dragging us down. So when it comes to the shifts, especially when wow, shifts. And I was just like, relation shift. That's something I might want to play with. Anyway, when we're talking about shifting, especially in relationships, it's a big deal, and there's great opportunity. So
But
you
you
were,
can't, you know what, Junie, but as
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you can't have a second act without a first act. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, because in order to get to the second act, you have had to have a first act. So there's so much learning we do in that first act. I think it's a gift. Mine was a
Yeah.
gift. I think it's a gift because I would never have evolved how I did now. And I see that with my clients until you go through that first act. So it's not bad. It's just history and it's a way to learn. That's how I look at it.
Totally. Absolutely. Absolutely. And funny enough, I'm an actress and I'm actually reading some scripts and I'm reading the first act of this play. And interestingly enough, we know there's a 2-act play, there's an intermission. There's an intermission. And
Mhm.
most people do not take the time between the first act and the second act to have that transition, to really come home to their hearts. So I am so curious for you. You are a divorce attorney. You were totally in it for many, many years, seeing other people going through it. And then suddenly you were too. What was your journey around it? What were some of the surprises? And how was that for you?
Well, so I've been a divorce attorney for 43, almost 44 years.
So just a
And
few years. You just know
yeah,
a few things there.
relationships and the nature of relationships and divorce. I love to talk to people about this because it's such a learning journey, right? I mean, if you don't go through them, you don't learn to get to the next step. And I love the concept of an intermission because people don't stop and pause. And I'll talk about my journey in a minute. But I thought I knew it all. And I approached being a divorce lawyer for many, many years as somebody who was a little more clinical about it. You analyze the case, you advocate, and you get a result. But of course, as I grew and I evolved, I learned it was so much more complex than that. Some marriages shouldn't end, some should have never started, some ran their course. So there were so many nuances and complexities and levels to them. In my own marriage, I think that by the time my marriage ended, I had learned so many lessons and I was afraid to let go of my marriage. Now, I didn't marry until I was 37 years old. It was my first and only marriage because I worked, my whole life. I've been working since I'm 15 years old. I was building a business. In the old days, it was a little more challenging for women to build a business. So in my own marriage, if I really look back and I own it, it probably was a marriage that shouldn't have happened. But I didn't have the skills or the tools or the emotional sophistication to understand that. So when it ended, I think the words I could use best was it was humbling. I
Mm.
felt vulnerable. I did not like the world knowing that I didn't have, I call it my Christmas card life because I love that world. And it probably was something I needed, a little humility and humbling. So it was the beginning of my journey was the end of my marriage. And I'm grateful for it.
Quick interruption, and then we'll get right back to the show. There is something time sensitive. There is a contest going on, and there's one lucky prize winner to win the Relationship Toolkit program. This is a 5-week program with me guiding you to help you really stand your ground and have healthy boundaries, to be able to speak your truth and trust your gut, to have good, solid self-esteem, and to learn what the healthy relationship that you desire looks like. You learn to rewrite your love story and so much more. So there'll be one winner. There's some really juicy second place prizes as well. So you're going to want to click the link in the show notes for enter the contest, and be sure to put your correct email address and your phone number so I can reach out to you and let you know if you're the winner. Good luck. Yeah, I love that. I love how you just shared that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, did it have an impact on you being a divorce attorney, suddenly being divorced in relationship to your clients? Because I'll just share, I ended a long-term relationship a few years ago, and I had to kind of go through some stuff around people see me as the relationship love coach. And now I'm ending a relationship, and it was humbling for me, and I had to kind of do some what are people going to think kind of thing. And then of course I'm like, well, wait a second, I stand for good, healthy partnership. And it did run its course, and he wasn't my forever guy. And yet there was this moment, or many moments, where I'm like, shit, how is this going to land on the people that
How
know
is this
me?
gonna land? And I love that. Well, so all the years while I was before I was married and while I was married, and I'm consulting with people, I'm handling complex divorces, I'm handling difficult emotional situations. I used to say, well, my marriage isn't so bad. Listen to their story. Or maybe there's some good in my marriage, because obviously, there's good and bad in everybody and in every relationship. So I rationalized it for many, many years by hearing other people's stories, some of which were horrific, quite frankly, that,
Yeah.
well, this isn't so terrible. But the truth is, not being not so terrible is not enough.
Oh,
And,
right?
it's just not enough.
That's
But
that's
I
not
did
enough. It's
love,
it's just okay.
but I loved the idea that I looked like I had it all together. I loved the idea,
Exactly.
successful, divorce lawyer, managing partner of a law firm, built a business, a family. I loved it. And the truth is, I hid behind that for a lot of years. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough that my former husband pulled the plug. I could not do it, and he knew
Yeah.
that. He since has passed away, but he knew I couldn't pull the plug emotionally, spiritually, appearance wise. So when he pulled the plug, I remember having to call key people in my life, because I'm very private, ironically, even though I talk about these things on my podcast and on your podcast.
I'm the same way.
Right, exactly. I'm very private. But ironically, I remember so clearly calling my business partners and a few close friends. Not that they were shocked. I think they were shocked that I was admitting it. I'm not so sure anybody thought I was all that happy, but I hid
Right.
it. And I remember it was the beginning of my healing. I thought,
Exactly.
okay, the world just didn't fall apart. And then I got myself into really good therapy, quite candidly. And at the ripe old age of 50 something, I began to deal with issues that were, kind of festering around for many, many years, and started pulling apart why I married this person. So I never look at it like why we ended it. Why did I marry him? And once I
Yeah.
started understanding that, but I love the concept of intermission, Junie, because I took an intermission. I took an 8 or 10 year pause, didn't date, raised my children. He wasn't involved, worked very hard. And that intermission is what changed my life.
All right.
Changed.
Let me, yeah, beautiful. I firstly want to just say bravo. Like, seriously, bravo. It takes so much courage to take the pause. It takes so much courage to look at your shit. It
Yeah.
takes so much courage to ask those questions. And the question I love that you did, the shift of not why did it end, but why did I go there in the first place? Because what I see over and over and over with my clients when they come to me is they are dating the same person over and over. They're
Oh,
having the same experience over and over. What is that about? We need to unpack that. So not only did you ask great questions, you did the work. You got support. That, I mean, seriously, most people don't do that. So I really want to honor you for that.
Virginia, it's interesting you say that. We do. So then when I did dip my toe in the dating world after 8 or 10 years or so, I dated very different packages, very different people. But once you peeled back the layers, I was dating the same
Yes.
person for a while.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, what? How did
Yeah.
that happen? And once I started to realize that and really identify, and I went through an interesting process to identify that, I realized that's what the problem is, because you could have somebody who looks different, acts different, tall,
Yes.
short,
Yes.
but deep down. So my weakness was my former husband was a very he was self-destructive, and he was damaged, and it doesn't mean he was bad.
Yeah.
And I that felt like love to me. But we always go back to our roots, right? And I could admit now, I was raised in a challenging situation. I had a father who had a lot of issues, did the best he could, and that's okay. But that felt like love to me, right? So when you learn that love is damaged or self-destructive,
That's what you know.
feels
And
like
that's
love.
what's
That's
comfortable.
right.
And that,
Right. Hey,
self-destruction equals love. And as
right.
little kids, that's what gets wired into our body. You're speaking, you're speaking to the choir here. Like
Right,
I totally get that.
right.
That's what shadow work is about, is why do we do what we do? And it's because we have been programmed somewhere along the way to gravitate to that, to heal it on some level because
Yes.
it wasn't okay, but we don't know any differently until we do.
That's right. And until you really understand that, because it's uncomfortable to experience love differently than that from when you're a child. So one of the things I learned through my journey was that if you really have a strong reaction to something older, you have a strong immediate attachment to somebody, or a strong reaction to something that's going on, it's usually a trigger from something younger. So for me, I would be attracted to people who had some damage. And then if it didn't work and it was chaotic or confusing, that was terrible for me because that was an old wound. So I really needed to unpack that. And I will tell you something, there were many times where I thought, oh, I'll just find somebody, it'll be okay. I don't have to go through this pain. Like, it'll be okay. And then there were times where I thought, I don't want to go out with anybody. I'm having a great life. And then I thought, well, it's time to grow up. I was in my 60s. Um, be a grown up and figure this out. And that's what I did. And it was hard. It was
Yeah.
really hard. But I'm living, when people say they're living their best life, that sounds like such garbage, right? But I can't believe the life I'm living now. And if you look at it from the outside, it looks great. But boy, was it painful for a lot of years. So I feel so
Yeah.
fortunate to have gotten through to the other side. So fortunate, really.
Good for you. Yeah. And I actually use that phrase, living my best life, because to me it's freedom. I'm free. Granted, there are still
Yeah.
some extra little roots that I still need to uncover and heal. It's never over. It's always layers. And I'm free. And it's like, to have the freedom. I used to walk on eggshells in my marriage. I was afraid of speaking up. I was a people pleaser. I was a micromanager. I was 200 pounds on a 5'3" body. I mean, like, I suffered because of all the stuff that we're talking about. And to be able to unpack that in the pause, to actually shift it and heal it. Oh my God. Like,
Well, there's also a
it's
lot of shame.
amazing.
There's also, Junie, a lot, I don't know if you experience this, but a lot of shame that goes along with that because, when you're not healthy physically or emotionally, people sense it. I mean, you think
Oh
you're
my
mad.
God.
I thought I was all together. People knew it. I mean, deep down, I knew it. So I thought, on the surface, I have it all together. I didn't. And when you stuff all that down, it's poison to your body. So I
Absolutely.
had so much shame associated with the unhappiness in my life and a lot of history in my life that when I started talking about it, I thought, yeah, it's okay. And the world's not going to fall apart. And I'm no longer shameful. And that was a big issue for me. Big issue.
Huge, huge. And
Huge
as you can
issue.
see, the title of my book is Loving the Whole Package, but the tagline is Shed the Shame and
That's the
Live Life Out Loud. And shame grows in the dark. When we're hiding anything about ourselves, there's a price we pay.
And
And
there's a
yes,
balance between that privacy and that self-respect, which we
yeah,
have,
healthy
and
boundaries.
health-bound and shame. And shame ruled by, one of the things that certain things sort of get you through your life. And Maya Angelou, the poet, has this great saying. So, when you know better, you do better. I'm paraphrasing it. You do the best you can until you know better. So I literally would read that and say, okay, I didn't know better. Now I know better. And that got me through literally
Boom, boom.
boom, boom. And I'm like, okay, now I know better. And
Yeah.
the shame started to really disappear and dissipate to a point where I now look at those things that I was shameful of, and they're now moments of pride for me because I worked them through.
Yeah. Yeah, I beautifully said. So beautifully
Thank you.
said. And when you look back and you see these things that used to be, filled with shame. I mean, I look back and I'm like, as much as I didn't like it and it was painful back then, such gifts to bring me to this place. Those moments of knots in my stomach and feeling so out of control, and just all those things that one goes through in a relationship. Oh my God, to the point of leaving the relationship. I pulled the plug. By the way, he thanked me years later because he said he couldn't do it.
Right.
And it's just so interesting. And to be able to look back and be free from it. And I do want to say one more thing
Sure.
about releasing the shame, and it really, taking the power out of it, taking the power back by looking at, and you said something so brilliant, which is we did the best we could with what we knew.
You bet.
And one of the things I see so often is when we shine a light on the shadow, the stuff that we're hiding, the stuff that we don't want anybody to see, when we can finally see it, we realize it wasn't our fault. And that in itself releases the shame, because it's like, I did the best I could. This was me trying to protect myself and my vulnerable, beautiful heart, because I had dealt with some painful things in the past. And when you see that, it's a breakthrough. So
So, they say
good
there's a great
kudos.
saying. Well, there's a great saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think that's what it is. But it's really true. When you shine a light on something and really examine it, it heals. And I didn't understand that because I was raised in a way, again, my parents did the best they could, where they hid everything. They hid our shame, they hid our poverty, they hid mental illness, they hid a lot.
Yeah.
So I was raised where you don't say anything, you don't tell anything, you keep your business private. So there was always shame associated with that. Well, in retrospect, there was no shame in it. It was just they did the best they could. But when you don't understand that you could share with self-respect and with boundaries, and it will be okay. But I spent so many years hiding things. And I don't think I think I was I was probably well into my 50s, if not 60s, when I thought, geez. And I used to look at a lot of other people, people I went to school with, college, law school, as, oh, well, they don't understand this because they have these nice families and these nice lives and these big houses. And I used to be very private about things. And I now, you now talk to meet them, they have their own stories. I now, if you meet them as an adult, or I'll still have friends from then, I'll say, I don't know if I knew you then. And they go, no, because we had our own story. So everybody's got a story, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I study with Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He
No.
does neuroscience and a lot of other things. Um, and and one of the things he says is 50% of our memories, our memories, we only remember about 50% accurately. I think that's what he says. So the stories we tell of the past, only 50% of them are actually accurate. And it's our perceptions, it's how we were feeling, it's all the, so many factors. And we're so attached to the past that's defining our present. And how are we showing up in relationships and dating when we haven't unpacked that? And sometimes don't even know what really even happened. So we need to take that time. I'm curious, how has your love life been since your pause? Are you willing to share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes. And thank you for asking. So I hit the pause button, and I had two girls to raise. And my former husband really wasn't engaged in that for whatever limitations he had. And then he passed away. And they were at different, 8 and 15 years old. There was a lot of living to do. And I'm
Ooh, yeah.
proud to say that we're extremely close, and they are living good lives, and I'm very proud of our relationship and who they are. But it was a lot to go through. So we sort of formed this little triangle pack, we used to call it, you do your job, I'll do mine, and I'll work and make sure we could all do our jobs. And they went through college and graduate school, and they're doing great. Not that that defines success, but they're doing very well.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I actually started dating is my older daughter expressed a lot of concern that I wasn't. And she said to me, and I am paraphrasing, it's kind of unfair of you to not be dating and find a partner because we worry about you all the time. No.
Wow. Wow.
I'm also an adoptive parent. So there's another layer of bonding that's extraordinarily blessed.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that
she
is
said,
so sweet.
yeah, she said we were. And I thought, and she said, like this whole, martyr, which I was a little bit. She said, it's kind of selfish. And that was, I don't know,
Mm.
maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And I thought, okay, I gotta be,
Wow.
yeah. And she was right. Um, she's actually a director of a nursing home and assisted living facility. So she works with older people, as she says. I don't like that category, but I thought, oh, okay. So I did dip my toe into the dating world. And I'll tell you something, it was hard.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than having your feelings hurt at 60 years old, or not liking somebody. They like you. Do they like me? So I did a lot of, well, maybe they're okay, maybe this. And I did a lot of, sort of second guessing and trying to figure it out. Do they like me? Do I like that? And then I stopped that. And when I stopped the second guessing and things, and I really identified what was important to me, I was able to meet a wonderful partner several years ago. I did a lot of reading and a lot of research, and I read a book by Dr. Dwayna Welch. She's been a guest on my podcast about the science of love, and I thought, science, you know. But one of the things she said, it was the best thing I ever did is write a list of everything that's really important to you.
Yeah.
Really important. Do not deviate from that list. And it wasn't things like profession or financial success. It was values.
Yeah.
I really, really worked on this. I wrote a list of values. Like, to me, and everybody has different values, it was really important that somebody wasn't angry at their ex-spouse, because I deal with angry people all the time, and I didn't want to deal with that. Or somebody who had a close extended family, because my family is extraordinarily important to me, my extended family. So, I mean, I wrote a list of all those things, and I didn't deviate, because before that, I'd be like, well, they don't have this, but that's okay.
Yes.
Now I'm like, I'm not deviating from it.
Biggest
And
mistake people make. Well, one of
right,
them anyway.
right. And once I did that, you know, Jenny, I really, and I stuck to it. And it was hard because I'm like, oh, and I actually met a wonderful partner several years ago,
Yay.
and we have a really healthy relationship. The fact that it took me until I was in my 60s to find it is wonderful, because I have the benefit of history. I know the difference. Like,
I love it.
know that I know this is precious. I know how to make it a priority. I know not to take it for granted. I know to talk through when there's an issue. I didn't know that. I did not have the tools. So when you talk about the second act, the next level, what a gift to get to the next level. And again,
Yeah.
you got to go through the first level to get here.
Yep. And so amazing. And in your 60s, because I think I'm so glad that you're disclosing your age and everything, because I have 40-year-olds come to me and go, I'm so old, it's never going to happen to me. 50-year-olds, oh, I'm so old. Just like I see 60 and 70-year-olds on a regular basis find partners. And you're absolutely right. I work with them on making sure they are so crystal clear about who they are, who they want, because otherwise we waste so much time with the maybes and maybe this is okay, and then 2, 3, 6 months later it's not working, obviously, because they're not connecting in the way that they desire. Yes,
Well, when
you're
when
a
you
smart
did
cookie here.
So what happens too is people put things on their important list that are sort of these superficial things. And they really, I mean, look,
Yeah.
did I want somebody who was smart? Yes, because I like to have interesting conversations. Did I want somebody who was ambitious? Yes. But I can genuinely say it didn't matter what they were ambitious at. Did I want somebody who had outside interests and who took care of their health? Yes. Because, you know, I want to live. So those were important things to me, as opposed to these things that might have been important to me 30, 40 years ago.
Mhm.
Really, really important. But I believe, and I think you believe this too, I tell everybody, and I see clients every day who are going through the end of the marriage, and my heart breaks because you never get used to it. I will never get used to it. But I say to everybody, I promise you, if you heal and you get through this, if you want to meet somebody on the other side, you will. It's, you know, my mother used to say there's a lid for every pot. I believe that with every fiber of my being. If you want to meet somebody, you will, because it's a lonely world out there without a partner. And if you don't, that's okay. I know many people who are happily single and they have connections in other ways. For me, my heart was lonely. And I finally also admitted that. I stopped doing you know, my life is great. I have a
Yeah,
successful
I'm
life.
fine by myself.
And I have a lot of friends and I have family and I'm very social. I gave that up too, that line that made me feel comfortable. And I thought, no, my heart's lonely. I really want a partner. And when I admitted that, it was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there
But
was
that's
a
what it takes, that
yeah,
honesty, to be really honest with yourself
yeah.
and drop the facade of I'm fine. And yeah,
Did a lot
so
of I'm
many
fine.
women, yeah, so many women are like, I have this great life and
And I think
and that's wonderful. And what would it be like if you had a partner that matched that? Because they're already thinking it's going to get blown up if they
yeah.
invite somebody in. And so that's where the work is. It's like, what are you truly wanting? And getting real and getting honest. So that is so key. That is so key. Yeah, so smart. We're almost at time, but I've got to ask you a question. I'm dying to know.
Sure.
for me, if I were going to you for, to be a lawyer for a divorce, I would be so thrilled that you have had an experience, that you've walked through it. And I'm wondering, do people know about that you've been there too? And how has that affected you in supporting these women or men as well to move through what can very often be difficult?
So another gift of age, right, Junie? We share. So there was a time in my life, even around the time my divorce, I didn't speak of it. I really needed to just stay in my lane and work and function because the pain was so extraordinary, and I
Oh,
had children to raise and a business to run, right? So
mhm.
I didn't. But as the years went on, yes, I share it all the time. And I say to people, look, this isn't about me. This is about your story. Just want to give you some perspective. I share about being an adoptive parent. I share about being a parent. I share about having a challenging life growing up. And I share about my marriage ending, not to overshare because people are here for them. And
Right.
I take that very seriously. People spend a lot of resources on divorce, both emotionally and financially, right? Because there's two costs to a divorce, financial and emotional investment. But I do share, and I say to them, it's not that you're looking at me now like I'm the poster girl, like, oh, everything's great. I promise you there are a lot of rough years, but if you do the work and you get through. So I do share that when it's
That's
appropriate,
great. Yeah.
I try to give people perspective. Again, there's a lot of things that we all go through. And I think it is age. As you get older, you've gone through parenting issues and parent issues and sibling issues and life issues. And I think it's important to connect with people because look, being a divorce lawyer is a lot of things. And of course, we need to understand the law and strategy,
Hmm.
life. I mean, that's given. But a lot of it is giving people the tools to navigate the path and getting them a good result. And you can't ignore the emotional cost of that. So I say to people, you have to be prepared. Are you prepared to give 2 years of your emotional life to get another $50,000 or whatever thing is? And that's got to be part of their evaluation. I don't make those decisions. They do. So I share that as well. For me, it was really important to cut my losses, work, make a living. I was very fortunate. I always worked. So financial insecurity wasn't an issue to me when I got divorced. I was very fortunate about that. I, ripped the Band-Aid off and just kept working. But a lot of people don't. And you need to navigate all that because you have to evaluate all the costs. So yes, I share. I think it's
That's great.
important to understand. I think it's important to connect with people. And I think it's important to have compassion. Another thing of age, right? Compassion is so important. And I represent a
Mm.
lot of men and a lot of women. And I will tell you, I represent, sometimes the wealthiest of the wealthiest, they are so humbled and comforted by the kindness and the compassion. And they don't see
Mm.
it. I used to think when I was younger, they might see that as weakness. Compassion and vulnerability is strength. So,
Absolutely. Woo! That was
uh,
amazing. Oh my
well,
God.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
spot on. Spot
my
on. And
favorite
and
topic, but anyway.
yeah, mine too. Mine too. Not a
Yeah.
surprise. And how blessed they are to have you
Oh,
with your gifts of a lawyer as well as the wise woman in you that can guide and support when it feels
thank you.
right. So that's amazing.
That's
So
kind.
tell of course. Tell us about your podcast.
Sure. So I started Heartbreak and Hope with Pat Barbarito, actually, as this journey was going on and on. And I realized that there's so much heartbreak, right? I mean, people come in sometimes, it's palpable, like you can't breathe listening to their stories. But then I thought, there's a lot of hope out there. So I talk about the end of a marriage, remarriage, death, financial devastation, drug addiction, heartbreak. But I always go to the hopeful side.
Mm.
And there is, the proverbial silver lining in life if you look for it. So I talk about so many situations. I've had episodes on physical heartbreak and death associated with it. I've had physicians on. I thought it was a good episode on sexual intimacy, the heartbreak of your body changing in your 60s and refinding your sexual intimacy in your 60s. I'm sure I humiliated my children with that episode, but because there's a lot, your body changing. You're like, oh
Yeah,
gosh, but there's hope. Figure it out. It works.
beautiful. It's
So
so
yeah, so
good.
I try to talk about things that are painfully sad, but unbelievably the optimism if you find the silver lining. It's not always the hope you think it's going to be. It's not, but there is always hope. And, you know, I believe
Yep.
that. I live my life like that at this point in my life.
So great. And you know, you're a testament to walking through the fire, getting to the other side, and being transparent and open about it, you know,
Wouldn't have
taking
it
the
any other
shame
way.
off of it. Yeah.
Wouldn't have it any other way. I feel
Great service.
so fortunate to have lived long enough to get through the other side. I really feel blessed for that, for myself. And I'm so blessed that my daughters have been able to see that. That has
Wow.
been a blessing of my life, to let my girls see, because they watched me through some challenges. So I'm so fortunate that I lived long enough, quite frankly, and am healthy enough, because not everybody gets that gift,
You're
to
right.
have gone to the other side. And I'm hopeful that is encouraging to people in their darkest moment, because we all have dark moments. You know, nobody gets away
Yeah.
without a dark moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised how you and I have met and that we're having this conversation, because what I am seeing is we're both holding the flashlight to what's possible. You know, we've both been through the ringer, we've done the work, and now we're able to go, hey, there's more if you want it. And so I love that you have that podcast. I'm going to make sure it's in the show notes so people can find you. Any last words before we wrap for today, sister?
No, but I love this conversation. I look forward to you being a guest on my podcast so we can continue the conversation in a different way,
Yes.
continue it. I think it's an important conversation. I think it's important. Look, there's a lot going on in the world, right? And you know, maybe this seems a little superficial because there's such tragedy going on in the world, and it's rough out there. But you know, these are silver linings that we could bring to people and hope, because if the heart is aching, all the other stuff doesn't make. And when the heart is healed and whole, everything else seems a little brighter. So
Absolutely. And that's how I see it. I mean, yeah, there's so much going on. And for every heart that feels more fulfilled and bright and filled with
magic.
possibility and magic and love, the world is a better place and we need more of that. So good
True.
work. Good work. Good
Thank you,
work.
Jamie. What a
Yay.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I look forward to speaking further, and thank you.
My total pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. All right, soul sister. Hopefully you got some good juju out of that. I'm sure you did.
Did.
I was actually talking to the other women, but I'm glad you did too.
So selfishly, I did. And as we enter into the summer months even further, I'm hopeful this was something that people pick up on and run with and enjoy. So thank you.
And
You go
that's a
ahead.
wrap.
Talk to your audience.
Okay. And so that's a wrap, sister, the one who's listening to the podcast or watching. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. That's how we reach more people and you get to be notified of amazing guests like Pat. And until we meet again, mwah.